The American retail landscape is experiencing its most dramatic transformation in modern history. In 2025, an estimated 15,000 stores will close their doors permanently across the United States. To put that in perspective, that's more than double the 7,325 closures we saw in 2024. This isn't just another business cycle correction. This is a fundamental restructuring of how Americans shop, where they shop, and whether physical retail can survive in its current form. Walk through any major shopping mall in America today, and you'll see the evidence firsthand. Empty storefronts with papered-over windows, going out of business signs promising 70% off everything. Parking lots that once overflowed on weekends now sit half empty on Saturday afternoons. The retail apocalypse that analysts have been predicting for years has arrived, and it's hitting harder and faster than most economists anticipated. But this collapse didn't happen overnight. The closures we're witnessing in 2025 are the culmination of economic pressures that have been building for years, accelerated by pandemic-era shifts in consumer behavior that never reversed, and compounded by new challenges that emerged in the post-pandemic economy. To understand why 15,000 stores are closing this year, we need to examine the interconnected web of economic forces reshaping American retail. Let's start with the companies leading these closures. Party City, the party supply retailer that became synonymous with birthdays and celebrations for generations of Americans, is closing all 700 of its locations nationwide. That's not a restructuring. That's a complete liquidation of a brand that once dominated its category. Joann Fabrics, the craft and fabric retailer, is shuttering 500 stores. Walgreens, one of America's largest pharmacy chains, is closing 450 locations. Big Lots is closing 480 stores. Forever 21 is closing 356 locations. Macy's, the department store icon, is closing 66 stores as part of what it calls a strategic downsizing. These aren't small regional chains struggling in isolated markets. These are national brands with decades of history, billions in annual revenue, and what were once considered unshakable positions in American retail. Their simultaneous collapse signals something deeper than individual company mismanagement. It signals a systemic shift in the retail economy. The first major factor driving these closures is inflation and its impact on consumer spending power. Between 2020 and 2024, cumulative inflation exceeded 20%. That means the dollar in your wallet today buys roughly 20% less than it did 5 years ago. For the average American household, that translates to needing an additional $12,000 per year just to maintain the same standard of living they had in 2020. But wages haven't kept pace. While nominal wages have increased, real wages adjusted for inflation have remained essentially flat for most workers. The result is a massive squeeze on discretionary spending. When families are paying more for groceries, more for gas, more for rent or mortgages, and more for utilities, the money available for shopping at retail stores simply evaporates. The items that retailers like Party City, Joann, and Forever 21 sell are almost entirely discretionary. When budgets tighten, these purchases are the first to go. This spending squeeze is particularly acute for middle-income households. Data shows that households earning between $50,000 and $100,000 annually have cut their retail spending by an average of 18% compared to pre-pandemic levels. This income bracket historically formed the backbone of American retail consumption. Their retreat from shopping represents a fundamental loss of the customer base that kept these stores profitable. The second major factor is the rise in interest rates and its cascading effects on retail operations. The Federal Reserve raised interest rates aggressively between 2022 and 2024 to combat inflation, taking the federal funds rate from near zero to over 5%. For retailers, this had immediate and painful consequences. Most retail chains operate on thin profit margins and rely heavily on debt financing to manage inventory, fund store build-outs, and cover operational expenses during slower seasons. When interest rates quintupled, the cost of servicing that debt skyrocketed. Companies that were marginally profitable suddenly found themselves losing money every quarter simply because their debt payments had doubled or tripled. Party City, for example, was carrying over $1.7 billion in debt when interest rates spiked. The company's annual interest payments alone exceeded $100 million, consuming what little profit margin existed in the party supply business. When your interest payments exceed your operating income, bankruptcy becomes inevitable. This debt burden is compounded by the fact that many retailers took on additional borrowing during the pandemic to survive lockdowns and capacity restrictions. They assumed interest rates would remain low indefinitely, allowing them to gradually pay down that debt over time. When rates spiked instead, these companies found themselves trapped in an unsustainable financial position with no easy escape. The third factor is the dramatic shift in operational costs, particularly labor and real estate. Labor costs have increased substantially across the retail sector. Minimum wage increases in numerous states, combined with a tight labor market that forced retailers to offer higher wages to attract workers, have pushed labor costs up by 15 to 25% for many chains. For a labor-intensive business like retail, where staffing represents one of the largest expense categories, this increase directly impacts profitability. Real estate costs present an even thornier problem. Most major retailers are locked into long-term leases signed years or even decades ago, when retail was thriving and landlords could command premium rents. These leases often include escalation clauses that automatically increase rent by 2 to 3% annually, regardless of the store's performance. As foot traffic declined and sales dropped, retailers found themselves paying the same or higher rent for locations generating far less revenue. Macy's closure strategy illustrates this dynamic clearly. The 66 stores Macy's is closing are predominantly located in malls where the anchor tenant model has collapsed. These stores occupy massive footprints, often 150,000 square feet or more, in locations where foot traffic has declined by 40 to 50% compared to pre-pandemic levels. The rent on these spaces, combined with the cost of staffing and maintaining such large stores, simply doesn't pencil out when sales have cratered. The fourth factor is the accelerated shift to e-commerce and the competitive pressure from online retailers. E-commerce share of total retail sales crossed 20% in 2024 and continues climbing. But the impact on physical stores is far greater than that number suggests, because e-commerce captures a disproportionate share of the most profitable retail categories: electronics, apparel, home goods, and general merchandise. These are precisely the categories where stores like Forever 21, Big Lots, and Joann operate. Amazon alone now captures over 40% of all online retail sales in the United States. The company's ability to offer vast selection, competitive pricing, and fast delivery has fundamentally changed consumer expectations. Why drive to a store, search for parking, walk through aisles, wait in checkout lines, and drive home when you can browse millions of items on your phone and have them delivered to your door in 2 days or less, often at a lower price? But Amazon isn't the only threat. The rise of ultra-low-cost online retailers like Temu and Shein has devastated certain retail categories. Shein, the Chinese fast fashion retailer, now ships over 2 million packages daily to U.S. consumers, offering clothing at price points that traditional retailers simply cannot match. A dress that costs $40 at Forever 21 might cost $8 on Shein. For price-conscious consumers, especially younger shoppers who are digital natives comfortable with online purchasing, the choice is obvious. These online competitors operate with fundamentally different cost structures. They don't pay rent on thousands of retail locations. They don't staff stores with thousands of employees. They don't maintain expensive inventory in every location. Their entire operation is optimized for digital commerce and direct-to-consumer shipping, giving them structural cost advantages that traditional retailers cannot overcome. The fifth factor is the decline in urban foot traffic and the lasting impact of remote work. Before the pandemic, office workers represented a crucial customer base for urban retail locations. Lunch breaks, after-work shopping, and commute-related purchases generated consistent traffic and sales. When companies shifted to remote work during the pandemic, that traffic evaporated. And unlike other pandemic disruptions, remote work has largely persisted. Current data shows that office occupancy in major U.S. cities remains at only 50 to 60% of pre-pandemic levels. That means 40 to 50% fewer potential customers walking past storefronts, browsing during lunch, or stopping in after work. For retailers in downtown locations, or near office complexes, this represents a permanent loss of their customer base. Walgreens' closure of 450 locations is heavily concentrated in urban areas where this foot traffic decline has been most severe. The shift to remote work has also changed shopping patterns in suburban areas. When people worked in offices, they often shopped near their workplace during the week and near their homes on weekends. Now, with more people working from home, shopping has consolidated into fewer, more purposeful trips, often to big-box retailers or online. The casual browsing that once drove traffic to mall stores and strip center retailers has largely disappeared. The sixth factor is the overbuilding of retail space relative to population and demand. The United States has approximately 23 square feet of retail space per capita, far exceeding any other developed nation. Canada has 13 square feet per capita. The United Kingdom has 5 square feet per capita. This overbuilding occurred during decades of retail expansion when developers and retailers assumed perpetual growth in consumer spending and population. But that growth has slowed and in many regions, reversed. Population growth in the United States has decelerated to its lowest rate in decades. Birth rates are declining. Immigration, which historically drove population growth, has become more restricted. Meanwhile, the retail space built during boom years remains, creating a massive oversupply. Simple economics dictates that when supply exceeds demand, prices fall and marginal operators fail. In retail real estate, that means store closures. This oversupply is particularly acute in suburban areas that experienced rapid development in the 1990s and 2000s. Developers built shopping centers anticipating continued population growth and rising incomes. When growth stalled and income stagnated, these centers found themselves competing for a smaller pool of customers with less money to spend. The result is the landscape we see today: half-empty strip malls, struggling shopping centers, and the steady drumbeat of closure announcements. The seventh factor is the shrinking middle class and the polarization of consumer spending. Economic data shows that the American middle class has been shrinking for decades, with households moving either up into higher income brackets or down into lower income brackets. This bifurcation has profound implications for retail. Retailers that serve the middle market, offering moderate prices and quality, find themselves squeezed from both ends. Affluent consumers increasingly shop at premium retailers or online platforms that offer luxury goods and high-end experiences. They're less price-sensitive and more focused on quality, exclusivity, and convenience. Budget-conscious consumers, meanwhile, gravitate toward discount retailers like Walmart, Dollar General, and online ultra-low-cost platforms like Temu. They're hyper-focused on price and willing to sacrifice selection and experience for savings. The middle-market retailers, the Macy's and JCPenney's and Kohl's of the world, find themselves with no clear value proposition. They're too expensive for budget shoppers and not premium enough for affluent consumers. This positioning problem has no easy solution, which is why so many middle-market retailers are either closing stores or filing for bankruptcy. Forever 21 struggles exemplify this dynamic. The brand once appealed to middle-income young shoppers looking for trendy, affordable fashion. But as income inequality widened, that customer base fractured. Wealthier young consumers moved to premium fast fashion brands like Zara or online platforms offering higher quality. Budget-conscious young consumers shifted to Shine and other ultra-low-cost alternatives. Forever 21, stuck in the middle, lost customers from both directions. The eighth factor is the changing demographics of American consumers and their shopping preferences. Younger generations, particularly millennials and Gen Z, shop fundamentally differently than previous generations. They're digital natives who grew up with smartphones and e-commerce. They're comfortable making major purchases online without ever seeing the product in person. They value convenience, speed, and price over the traditional retail experience. But beyond shopping habits, these generations also have different spending priorities. They're spending more on experiences, travel, dining out, and entertainment, and less on physical goods. They're less interested in accumulating possessions and more interested in access and experiences. This shift in priorities directly impacts retailers selling physical goods, especially discretionary items like home decor, crafts, and party supplies. Additionally, younger consumers are more values-driven in their purchasing decisions. They care about sustainability, ethical sourcing, and corporate social responsibility. Many traditional retailers, built on fast fashion models and disposable goods, struggle to align with these values. When given a choice between a traditional retailer and a brand that aligns with their values, they increasingly choose the latter, even if it means paying slightly more or shopping online. The ninth factor is the collapse of the anchor tenant model that sustained American malls for decades. Traditional shopping malls were built around anchor tenants, large department stores like Macy's, JCPenney, and Sears that drew customers to the mall. Smaller retailers benefited from the foot traffic these anchors generated. But as anchor tenants have closed or downsized, the entire mall ecosystem has collapsed. When a Macy's closes in a mall, it doesn't just eliminate one store. It eliminates the primary traffic driver for dozens of smaller retailers in that mall. Foot traffic drops by 30 to 50% almost immediately. Smaller stores that were marginally profitable suddenly become unprofitable. They close, which further reduces foot traffic, creating a death spiral. Mall owners find themselves with massive vacant anchor spaces that are extremely difficult to release because few retailers need or can afford 150,000 square foot locations anymore. Some malls have attempted to reinvent themselves by replacing retail anchors with entertainment venues, restaurants, or even residential units. But these conversions are expensive, time-consuming, and often unsuccessful. The reality is that many malls built during the retail boom of the 1980s and 1990s simply have no viable future in today's retail landscape. They're too large, too expensive to maintain, and located in areas where consumer demand no longer supports that much retail space. The 10th factor is the rise of buy now, pay later services and their impact on consumer debt and spending patterns. Services like Affirm, Klarna, and Afterpay have exploded in popularity, particularly among younger consumers. These services allow shoppers to split purchases into installment payments, often with no interest if paid on time. While this makes purchases more accessible in the short term, it's creating a new form of consumer debt that's largely unregulated and poorly understood. Data shows that consumers using buy now, pay later services spend 20 to 30% more per transaction than they would if paying upfront. This might seem positive for retailers, but it's creating a debt overhang that will eventually constrain future spending. When consumers have multiple buy now, pay later obligations across different platforms, tracking total debt becomes difficult. Default rates on these services have been rising, and as more consumers find themselves overextended, their ability to continue shopping will diminish. For physical retailers, buy now, pay later presents another challenge. These services are primarily integrated into online shopping platforms. While some retailers offer them in-store, the user experience is clunkier and less seamless than online. This creates yet another advantage for e-commerce over physical retail, further accelerating the shift away from stores. The 11th factor is the supply chain disruptions that have plagued retail since the pandemic and their lasting effects on inventory management and costs. The pandemic exposed the fragility of global supply chains that retailers had optimized for efficiency rather than resilience. When factories shut down, shipping containers got stuck at ports, and logistics networks seized up, retailers found themselves unable to get products to stores. While the acute phase of supply chain disruption has passed, the aftereffects persist. Shipping costs remain elevated compared to pre-pandemic levels. Lead times for inventory are longer and less predictable. Retailers have responded by holding more safety stock, which ties up capital and increases warehousing costs. For companies already operating on thin margins, these additional costs are unsustainable. Moreover, supply chain unpredictability makes inventory planning much harder. Retailers that order too much inventory risk markdowns and clearance sales that destroy profitability. Retailers that order too little risk stockouts that frustrate customers and drive them to competitors. This balancing act has become significantly more difficult, and many retailers are getting it wrong, leading to either excess inventory costs or lost sales. The 12th factor is the changing nature of brand loyalty and the decline of traditional retail marketing effectiveness. Previous generations developed strong loyalty to retail brands. They shopped at the same stores their parents shopped at. They trusted familiar brands and were willing to pay premium prices for that trust and familiarity. But younger consumers exhibit far less brand loyalty. They're willing to try new brands, switch retailers based on price or convenience, and abandon brands that disappoint them. This erosion of brand loyalty makes customer acquisition and retention far more expensive for retailers. Traditional marketing channels like television advertising, print ads, and direct mail have become less effective, especially with younger consumers. Digital marketing offers better targeting, but is increasingly expensive as platforms like Google and Facebook have raised advertising costs. retailers find themselves spending more on marketing to acquire customers who are less loyal and more likely to switch to competitors. Social media has also changed the marketing landscape in ways that disadvantage traditional retailers. Influencer marketing and viral trends can make or break products overnight. A product featured by the right influencer can sell out in hours, but this creates unpredictable demand spikes that traditional retailers struggle to capitalize on. By the time they recognize a trend and order inventory, the trend has often moved on. Online native brands and platforms like Amazon are far better positioned to respond quickly to these viral moments. The 13th factor is the impact of crime and theft on retail profitability, particularly in urban locations. Organized retail crime has increased dramatically in recent years. Coordinated groups enter stores, grab merchandise, and leave before security can respond. The National Retail Federation estimates that organized retail crime costs retailers over $100 billion annually. But the impact goes beyond direct losses. Retailers respond to high theft rates by locking up merchandise, which degrades the shopping experience and requires more staff to assist customers. They install expensive security systems and hire security personnel, increasing operational costs. In extreme cases, they close stores in high-theft areas entirely. Walgreens' closure of numerous urban locations is partly driven by theft rates that made these stores unprofitable despite strong sales. The political and legal response to retail theft has been inconsistent. Some jurisdictions have raised the threshold for felony theft, inadvertently making organized retail crime less risky for perpetrators. Prosecutors in some cities decline to pursue retail theft cases, creating a perception that the crime carries no consequences. Retailers operating in these jurisdictions face an impossible situation: absorb unsustainable losses or abandon the market entirely. Many are choosing the latter. The 14th factor is the generational wealth gap and its impact on spending power across age groups. Baby boomers, who drove retail growth for decades, are aging out of their peak spending years. They're downsizing homes, reducing consumption, and shifting spending toward healthcare and services rather than goods. Meanwhile, younger generations have accumulated far less wealth at comparable ages than previous generations. Millennials, now in their 30s and 40s, have roughly half the wealth that baby boomers had at the same age. They're burdened with student loan debt, facing higher housing costs, and dealing with stagnant real wages. Gen Z, just entering the workforce, faces even steeper challenges. They're inheriting an economy with higher costs, less job security, and fewer opportunities for wealth accumulation. These generational wealth disparities directly impact retail spending. The retailers closing in 2025 built their business models around middle-class consumers with disposable income. But that consumer base is shrinking and aging. Younger consumers, who should be replacing older shoppers, simply don't have the financial resources to maintain the same level of retail spending. This demographic and economic shift represents a permanent change in the retail landscape, not a temporary downturn that will eventually recover. The 15th factor is the impact of housing costs on discretionary spending and retail consumption. Housing has become the single largest expense for most American households, consuming 30 to 40% or more of household income in many markets. When housing costs rise faster than incomes, every other spending category gets squeezed. Retail spending, being largely discretionary, takes the biggest hit. The housing affordability crisis is particularly acute for younger households, the demographic that traditionally drove retail spending on clothing, home goods, and discretionary items. When a young couple is spending 50% of their income on rent or mortgage payments, they have little left for shopping at stores like Forever 21 or Joann. They're forced to prioritize essentials and cut back on everything else. This dynamic is unlikely to reverse without significant changes in housing policy or dramatic increases in wages. Moreover, high housing costs are driving migration patterns that hurt retail in expensive markets. Young people and families are leaving high-cost cities for more affordable regions. This migration reduces the customer base in expensive urban areas where many retailers have significant presence, while increasing demand in lower-cost areas where retail infrastructure may be less developed. Retailers struggle to adapt their store networks quickly enough to match these shifting population patterns. The 16th factor is the evolution of consumer expectations around convenience and the experience gap between online and in-store shopping. E-commerce has trained consumers to expect instant gratification, vast selection, easy returns, and personalized recommendations. Physical stores struggle to match these expectations. Walking into a store means accepting limited selection, the possibility that items are out of stock, the need to physically search for products, and the friction of checkout lines. For many consumers, especially younger digital natives, the in-store experience feels antiquated and frustrating compared to online shopping. They can't understand why a store doesn't have their size when the website shows it's available. They're annoyed by long checkout lines when they could complete a purchase on their phone in seconds. They're frustrated by sales associates who know less about products than online reviews do. These experience gaps drive customers away from physical stores. Some retailers have invested heavily in improving the in-store experience, adding technology like mobile checkout, interactive displays, and augmented reality features. But these investments are expensive and often fail to meaningfully change consumer behavior. The fundamental reality is that for most product categories, online shopping offers a superior experience in terms of convenience, selection, and price. Physical stores need to offer something online cannot, whether that's immediate gratification, tactile product evaluation, or experiential elements. Most struggling retailers offer none of these advantages. The 17th factor is the consolidation of retail power among a few dominant players and the competitive disadvantages facing smaller chains. Walmart and Amazon together now capture over 40% of total U.S. retail sales. These companies have scale advantages that smaller retailers simply cannot match. They negotiate better prices from suppliers. They can afford to operate at lower margins. They have resources to invest in technology, logistics, and customer experience that smaller competitors lack. This concentration of retail power creates a winner-take-all dynamic. Walmart and Amazon get stronger while competitors get weaker. Suppliers increasingly depend on these retail giants for distribution, giving Walmart and Amazon even more negotiating leverage. Consumers gravitate toward these platforms because they offer the best prices and widest selection. The feedback loop reinforces itself, making it nearly impossible for mid-sized retailers to compete. The retailers closing in 2025 are caught in this squeeze. They're too small to compete with Walmart and Amazon on price and selection, but too large and bureaucratic to compete with nimble online native brands on innovation and customer experience. They occupy an uncomfortable middle ground with no clear path to sustainable profitability. Absent dramatic restructuring or market changes, their long-term viability is questionable. So what does all of this mean for the future of American retail? The 15,000 store closures in 2025 are not an aberration or a temporary setback. They represent the acceleration of a fundamental transformation that will continue for years to come. Analysts project that an additional 50,000 to 75,000 stores will close over the next 5 years as these economic and competitive pressures intensify. The retail landscape that emerges from this transformation will look dramatically different from what we've known. Physical stores will still exist, but in far fewer numbers and serving different purposes. Successful physical retail will focus on categories where in-person shopping offers clear advantages: groceries and perishables, products requiring fitting or tactile evaluation, and experiential retail that offers entertainment or social value beyond mere transactions. The stores that survive will be either discount retailers serving price-conscious consumers, premium retailers serving affluent customers seeking luxury experiences, or specialized retailers offering unique products or expertise that online platforms cannot replicate. The middle market, where most of the current closures are concentrated, will largely disappear. The Macy's and JCPenney's and Kohl's of the world will either radically reinvent themselves or cease to exist. For American communities, these closures will have profound impacts beyond just fewer shopping options. Retail has been a major employer, providing entry-level jobs and career pathways for millions of Americans. As stores close, these jobs disappear. Some workers will transition to warehouse and logistics jobs supporting e-commerce, but these positions are often located in different areas and require different skills. Many displaced retail workers will struggle to find comparable employment. The closures will also impact commercial real estate values and local tax revenues. Empty storefronts reduce property values, which reduces property tax collections that fund local services. Struggling malls and shopping centers may be demolished or converted to other uses, but these transitions take years and often leave communities with blighted properties in the interim. The social fabric of communities that formed around shopping centers and Main Street retail districts will fray as these gathering places disappear. For consumers, the retail transformation offers both benefits and drawbacks. Online shopping provides unmatched convenience, selection, and often better prices. The ability to shop from home, compare options instantly, and have purchases delivered is genuinely valuable. But we're also losing something in this transition: the serendipity of browsing and discovering unexpected products. The social experience of shopping with friends or family. The ability to see, touch, and evaluate products before purchasing. The immediate gratification of taking something home today rather than waiting for delivery. There's also growing concern about the monopolization of retail and its long-term consequences. When a handful of companies control the majority of retail sales, they gain enormous power over suppliers, workers, and consumers. They can dictate terms to manufacturers, suppress wages for employees, and potentially raise prices once competition has been eliminated. The regulatory and antitrust frameworks designed to prevent such concentration were built for a different era and may be inadequate for addressing the realities of modern e-commerce-dominated retail. The environmental impact of this retail transformation is also significant and often overlooked. The shift from centralized retail locations to millions of individual deliveries has dramatically increased packaging waste and transportation emissions. Every online order requires cardboard boxes, plastic padding, and fuel for delivery vehicles making multiple stops. While proponents argue that eliminating trips to stores reduces overall emissions, studies show that the last-mile delivery component of e-commerce actually generates more emissions per item than traditional retail distribution. Additionally, the closure of thousands of stores creates enormous amounts of physical waste. Store fixtures, shelving, signage, and infrastructure are often demolished and sent to landfills rather than repurposed. The buildings themselves, particularly large anchor stores and standalone locations, are difficult to repurpose and may sit vacant for years. This represents not just economic waste, but environmental waste on a massive scale. The psychological and social impacts of retail's decline deserve consideration as well. For many Americans, particularly older generations, shopping was a social activity and a form of entertainment. Going to the mall wasn't just about buying things. It was about seeing people, being part of a community, having a destination and purpose. As these spaces disappear, we lose gathering places that served important social functions beyond commerce. Teenagers who once hung out at malls now spend that time on social media. Retirees who walked malls for exercise and social connection have fewer options. Small business owners who ran boutiques and specialty shops in retail centers lose not just their livelihoods, but their identities and sense of purpose. These losses are difficult to quantify, but nonetheless real and significant. Looking ahead, several scenarios could unfold. The most likely is continued consolidation and closure, with physical retail stabilizing at a much lower level than today, perhaps 30 to 40% fewer stores than currently exist. The survivors will be highly efficient operators with clear value propositions and strong balance sheets. Walmart, Costco, and other big-box retailers will likely strengthen their positions. Dollar stores will continue expanding in underserved markets. Luxury retailers serving affluent consumers will maintain boutique presences in wealthy areas. A second scenario involves technological innovation that revitalizes physical retail. Some retailers are experimenting with augmented reality, virtual try-on technology, automated stores with no checkout, and integration between online and physical shopping that creates seamless omni-channel experiences. If these innovations prove successful and economically viable, they could give physical stores new relevance and competitive advantages. However, the investment required is substantial, and most struggling retailers lack the capital to pursue these strategies. A third scenario involves regulatory intervention to level the playing field between online and physical retail. This could include stricter enforcement of sales tax collection for online retailers, antitrust action against dominant e-commerce platforms, or policies supporting local retail and small businesses. However, political will for such intervention appears limited, and consumers have shown they prefer the convenience and prices of online shopping, even if it means losing local stores. The most pessimistic scenario involves a continued downward spiral where store closures accelerate beyond current projections. If economic conditions worsen, if inflation remains elevated, if unemployment rises, if consumer debt defaults increase, discretionary spending could fall even further. This would push more retailers into bankruptcy and create a cascade of closures that devastates commercial real estate markets and local economies. While this scenario is not the most likely, it's also not impossible given the fragility of many retailers' financial positions. For individual consumers and communities, adapting to this new retail reality requires both practical adjustments and broader thinking about what we want our commercial landscapes to look like. Supporting local businesses, when possible and affordable, helps maintain community character and local employment. Being mindful of the full costs of online shopping, environmental, social, and economic, can inform purchasing decisions. Advocating for policies that support diverse, resilient local economies rather than winner-take-all consolidation can shape the retail landscape of the future. The retail collapse of 2025 is not just a business story or an economic trend. It's a fundamental transformation of American commercial life with implications for how we work, how we shop, how we build communities, and how we structure our economy. The 15,000 stores closing this year represent not just square footage and lost jobs, but the end of an era in American capitalism. Whether what emerges from this transformation will be better or worse depends on choices we make collectively as consumers, business leaders, policymakers, and citizens. The convenience of ordering everything online is undeniable. The efficiency of consolidated retail platforms is real, but so are the costs, economic, social, and environmental, of losing the diverse, locally rooted retail ecosystem that existed for generations. The retail apocalypse is here. The question now is what we build from the ruins.